So we're here today on June 21st for the Marshfield Story Project, and we're going to ask Mike to introduce himself.
My name is Mike Caccavo. I live on Pigeon Pond Road, which is on Maple Hill in Marshfield, and we moved here back in 1978.
Wow, so you've lived here quite a bit. So talk about why you came to live in Marshfield, because you grew up in Barry, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Barry. My wife and I both grew up in Barry, and once we got married, we decided we want to live in the country, and it was just serendipitous that we found the house we did. My parents were looking at some land, and my mother was riding around with a realtor and invited my wife to go. And they got to talking, and my wife said, we'd like a place in the country, and she said, I got a house for you, and she drove out and showed the house, and my wife fell in love with it. So.
And there you are.
And there we are. Yeah. She, my first impression going to it was, boy, this is a long way out.
So Pigeon Pond Road, now how far is that off pavement?
It's 3 miles out of Plainfield Village.
Okay.
Yeah, to our house.
And are you on a dirt road?
It's all gravel road all the way up.
So you grew up in Barry. Is it different living here in Marshfield than Barry, or similar? Or?
Well, it's different. I mean, Barry, I lived in the city. We'd walk or ride our bikes everywhere. We could walk all around Barry, but there's not so much in living out in Plainfield or out in Marshfield and up on the hill there.
Not the same amenities.
Right. Yeah.
So is it suited to who you are, living out in
Oh
the
yeah,
country when you moved?
Yeah, we love it. We've got land, and we butt up against a big tract of land that's totally undeveloped. So there's a lot of, if you want to hike, or it's just country.
And so, do you use it that way? Do you garden? Do you hike?
Oh yeah, we've got we didn't when the kids were young, but now we've got a good-sized garden, and we do a little bit of biking and some walking. I wouldn't call it hiking, but snowshoe in the wintertime sometimes. But it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a dead end, basically a dead end road, so the traffic isn't bad. Yeah.
So you raised your family here?
Yeah, great,
So
great place to raise the kids.
Talk about that. Why is it great?
Well, it's a real community. The kids made friends early, and they're still still in contact with them. Although that was the same in Barry. I mean, we made a lot of good friends, but just being out in the country was nice.
How many kids do you have?
2.
Boys?
2 boys.
Two boys?
Yeah.
And were friends close by? Did you have to drive them to see
Oftentimes,
friends?
well, actually, that was a downside. Oftentimes, we did have to drive them. So, but they rode the bus to school, which I never did. I always had to walk to school. But
it came by your house?
they came right by picked them up right at the end of the yard. So yeah, it was good. And we made a lot of good friends with the kids' parents. We're still in contact with them. So.
Through the school?
Through the school, yeah.
Like activities, like
Yeah.
school activities, or
Yeah.
just even socially
Yeah.
beyond the school?
Yeah,
Like-
and when the kids got older, we started a Cub Scout den with 7 or 8 of their friends, and then when the leader, the Cub Scout pack leader, decided his kids were out, so he was out, we stepped in and took over. So we ran the Cub Scout pack for several years.
And what does that mean? Did you meet
So-
regularly?
So in Cub Scouts, you have a den, which is a small group of kids that meet maybe once a week, and you work on different scouting projects. But then, like once a month, there would be a group meeting of all of the dens, and that's the pack.
And is that in the county?
No, it was really just within Marshfield, Plainfield area. So I don't remember how many dens we had, but they're different age groups, so it would be like 4 or 5 different age groups, and we'd all meet together like once a month and have a big meeting and find out what people were doing and give awards and all that kind of stuff. So.
Would you say it was like very well a lot of participation?
Oh
from
yeah,
kids?
back then we had a lot of participation. Yeah, it was, I don't know, we probably had 8 or 10 packs maybe.
Mhm.
I mean 8 or 10 dens, so in the pack, which was good.
And did you go on like overnight camping?
Yeah, well, Cub
trips?
Scouts wasn't really, that was for the older groups, when you moved into Boy Scouts, and we're never very successful in getting Boy Scouts organized here, so the kids were more interested in being in Cub Scouts, and then they'd go off on their different things. And not many kids went on to Boy Scouts, and when they did, they usually went to Barry.
Mhm.
They had a couple of Boy Scout troops in Barry. But,
And did you do that with your wife? Are you den parents kind of?
well,
thing?
we were den parents. I was the pack leader because I'd get up front and talk. So, but she was administrative staff too. We were pretty much shared all of that stuff. Yeah.
So, in raising your kids, what kind of things did you do as a family? What did your kids do individually?
Well, our kids got into. Well, they did actually all of the sports that were offered. You know, they do t-ball and little league when it was spring, and they would do basketball in the winter. But they really got into soccer. They were really into soccer. So even as we moved on, there wasn't an awful lot of soccer in Marshfield, other than in the fall at Twinfield. But there was a big soccer program in Barry, so we'd do spring soccer in Barry, and the kids would do, they actually got into a men's league while they were in high school, so they do that in the summertime.
So they didn't have to do it in Marshfield. You could
Right,
go to another town.
we could go to another town, so we did that.
And you were involved?
Mostly just transport at that point. When they got into high school, my wife did a lot of photography work, so she became sort of the unofficial team photographer. So she would be taking pictures of all of the games. At the end of a game, I'd have 5 or 6 rolls of film that I'd have to take to have developed. And so one of the things they needed at the soccer games was somebody to run the clock, to be the timer, and help get the kids in and off the field. And so I did that for the 6 years that our kids were playing. And it was great. It was a great time. We won the state championship one year that our kids were playing, and they went to the state championship and lost one year. So they did well, and we had a good time.
And besides sports?
Well, besides sports, back then Twinfield had a really strong arts program, particularly music. So all the kids were in band and jazz band. Both of them were in band and jazz band, and my older son was also in the chorus. They had a really strong program for that. Didn't do much with theater, but a lot of singing, a lot of music, which was great.
So both your kids and you guys, you parents were happy with the school system?
Oh yeah,
and what it
yeah. Oh, we
offered?
thought Twinfield was a great school system. They did a really good job with it.
Sounds like they had an all-around.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of opportunity.
They did, yeah. And it wasn't all sports focused. I mean, they put a lot of emphasis on the arts. They did a lot of interesting things. They would have different groups come in.
To sing?
Oh well, just to expose the school to other cultures. I can't recall all of them, but there was one that was a group of Maoris from New Zealand that came and did a whole thing. They would meet with the different classes and show them some of their traditional dances or traditional skills and stuff, and talk to the kids. It was really cool.
And who coordinated all that?
It was a project through the school. I can't remember what they called it.
Wow.
Yeah, they did a lot.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So besides the Maoris coming, what other memories stand out from your kids being, small?
Oh, we also, they did Odyssey of the Mind, which and we helped the kids participate. We were kind of den parents or the Odyssey of the Mind parents for that, you know, and.
So that means you have one child and that you're working
Well,
with?
they'd get a group of kids together that would work on one particular type of project or something, so we tried to facilitate that.
And what did your kids work on?
Oh,
Do you
gosh,
remember?
I can't remember. I can't remember.
That's great. So
I remember we went to they had a big, the Odyssey of the Mind competition was at UVM one year, and so we took all of the kids down and we coordinated with a bunch of the other parents, and we all stayed at the hotel in Burlington that had an indoor pool. That was the big thing. And we had a cabana room. It was right off the pool, so everybody would come to our room and they could change and go right out to the pool. That was pretty cool.
wow.
Yeah.
Sounds
it was
like you
fun.
were a very content Pied Piper kind of parent who
Oh yeah, yeah, we enjoyed it.
participated, and you really fostered a love of learning.
Yeah, oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I was a history major in college, and there was a lot of history discussion at our kitchen table. My wife said she learned history at our kitchen table.
Vermont history, U.S. history?
General history, Vermont, U.S., world, depended on the day.
Pick up where we left off. You were
Okay.
talking about why did you want to be moderator?
I think I like the idea of being moderator. I mean, I certainly wasn't silent at the meetings, and I had to give up being, voicing my opinion at the meeting if I was going to be moderator. But I like the idea of running an orderly meeting and making sure everybody had their opportunity to be heard, to say what they wanted to say, to ask the questions they wanted, and to keep everything civil. And all of the other moderators were really good at that. And I wanted to be sure that that continued. Because during the time before I was moderator, there were some pretty contentious issues. Marshfield is an interesting town. There are some, and Plainfield to a similar extent. We have a lot of people who came here from the cities and went to Goddard. I'm not picking on Goddard. I mean, a lot of people came for other reasons, but sort of the hippies from the '60s who were very liberal, who have come up and are living in Marshfield with pretty liberal and progressive views. And then we've got a lot of people who are longtime Vermonters and much more conservative, and even people who've moved here with a very conservative bent. But we all live together, and we all really get along pretty well because we know each other as people. And I wanted to be sure that was going to continue when we moved to the next moderator. And I didn't feel that it was threatened, but I wanted to be part of it. When I was in high school, I was on the student council, and I was the parliamentarian for the student council, so I had some familiarity with Robert's rules and rules of meeting procedures. So, and there's a lot of that with being moderator. So I found it an interesting thing. So that's why I wanted to do it. And there were there were some people who were pretty good about learning the rules and how they could maneuver them. But there
Residents who wanted to get around the rules.
Yeah, or who knew their way around the rules and knew how to use them.
For instance, like what kind of situation?
Well, there was the rule is that if you're the person who puts forward a motion, so if I read the motion and somebody raises their hand and said, "I so move," the person who moves the motion gets to speak first. And so if you don't like the motion, you can move it, and then you could move to table it. Or you could call the question and cut off all debate. because you get recognized first. And there were a couple of people in town who knew that.
And what would happen if something got tabled but really needed to be discussed?
Well, most of the time it wasn't the stuff that really needed to be discussed, because, I mean, you're not gonna table the budget, for example. But they might call a question. They could, if you call a question, that just means you go to an immediate vote. If you have to vote on the call of the question, but if it passes, then you go to an immediate vote, and nobody gets to discuss it. No discussion.
So you know how to...
Well, I knew that that was a rule, so it's handy as long as the moderator knows what the person's doing. You can't stop them. But, you know, there were like a lot of social issues that came up in years past, you know, the tar sands pipeline, you know, National Earth Day, a lot of
being a something city,
a sanctuary city. Yeah, we didn't do that, but I don't recall that we did. But something like that.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of generally liberal social issues that came up, and there were some people who didn't want to deal with that, so they would try to maneuver to cut off debate. It was always interesting. But it was, and then another rule was that if you are in something like that, then you're supposed to alternate, so you're not going to get 5 people talking in favor of it and then just 1 or 2 talking against it. If you know there are people for and people against, you're supposed to go back and forth.
But you have to know that. They don't necessarily.
But with a debate like that, the moderator can ask, are there people who want to speak against this motion? Please stand over there. People who want to speak for it, stand over here, and we will go alternate. You speak, then you speak. You know, we can do that. And we haven't had an awful lot of call to do that since I've been moderator.
Yeah, how long have you been moderator?
6 years, maybe 6 or 7. I've frankly, I'm not sure. It's kind of lost count. I'd have to go back and check. But
close enough.
Yeah, it's the first thing I did was try to revive the John Lamberton joke. So I always try to open the meeting with the joke, and I give the story about John Lamberton having done that. It's surprisingly hard to find a good joke to open a public meeting with these days.
With all political persuasion.
Yes, you know, and all
cultural persuasion.
Exactly. Yeah. So I keep on the lookout and try to make note throughout the year of jokes that are potentials for the town meeting.
Yeah, as long as you know it's coming up. I mean, when you said that, I was wondering if John did that.
Well, it was interesting. John had a family that lived in Marshfield for several years afterwards, and one of his daughters tried to keep it alive for a couple of years. She would get up and give the joke. Tom McClay would recognize her, and she'd try to do it. And then I ran into one of the family members years later, and she said, you know, when we were cleaning out Dad's house, we found his notebook. And she said, I wish we'd saved it. We would have given it to you, but I don't know that it would have been a lot of help, because he didn't have all of his jokes. He just had the punchlines. So you'd have to make up a story around the punchline.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah.
Oh, so I want to talk about COVID in a few ways, but in relation to town meeting, how did the town have to adapt around COVID? Because we actually had a meeting last year. No, but we didn't this year, right?
Right. Yeah, we had. Yeah, we just got through town meeting because the COVID lockdown really started just after St. Paddy's Day, which was in 2019.
In 2020.
In 2020, that's
Yeah.
right. In
yeah.
2020.
Yeah, it was March 13th, as I recall, and our town meeting was on March 2nd, maybe?
Probably,
Yeah,
it was
so it was
early.
within a week or so.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
And so what happened this year?
So this year, the select board decided that it was all going to be done by Australian ballot. The legislature passed some emergency legislation to allow that, because otherwise you have to actually have a a public meeting to vote to go to Australian ballot. So it would have to be voted at a regular in-person town meeting to go to Australian ballot. But the legislation this year allowed that. It was all by vote. I mean, all by mail, and they mailed out the ballots well in advance. I think it went very well. I don't know what the voter participation was, because I'm the moderator, but I'm not on the Board of Civil Authority, so I wasn't part of the counting.
Part of that.
Sometimes they would call in volunteers, and I'd go in and help count, but not this year. So I don't know what the actual voter turnout was or voter response was, but I think it was good.
And you had an opinion about what the downside of all
Yeah,
that?
well, we had one of the things that the thing that I'm concerned about with town meeting is the nice thing about our town meeting is we don't get the participation that I'd like. I wish that we had more people who would actually come to town meeting. But the nice thing about having an in-person town meeting is voter participation. You learn what the issues are. You get to ask questions of the decision makers and put them on the spot. I think our select board is as frugal as they are and responsive as they are, because they know that they're going to have to sit up there in front of a big group of townspeople and answer questions. So they're pretty careful with how they spend their money. And I contrast that with, say, Berry City. My office is in Berry, and my secretary lives in Berry City. And Berry City's budget goes up by significant amounts every year. And I think it's because the city council doesn't have to sit in front of voters and answer questions, because they're always in charge of their meetings. So the mayor is in charge of the meeting, and he can control the debate.
And doesn't have to justify.
And doesn't, yeah, and so, and they're not sitting in front of a large group. So if a few people show up and they're not happy, he can control that debate. But it's a different thing if you're sitting in front of 120 of the town taxpayers, and they're asking, why are you spending? Why are you buying a new grader? What's wrong with our grader now? Or why are you buying so much sand? And these are the questions that do come up, and it's good to put them on the spot.
Before we continue, your tie's moved over because
I moved.
Doing this.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Just so you know, I don't know if you care.
That.
For a woman, I would say something. Just one last thing then. Are we going to have...
I think the plan, as far as I know, and I'm not always in the loop, the plan, as far as I know, is to go back to a regular in-person town meeting. Although for the last several years we've been having discussions about, do we want to move town meeting from the first Tuesday in March to the Saturday before, or the Sunday before, or an evening meeting. And so we're still exploring that to get an idea of where we might get better participation, or if we would get better participation. But all of those have, they have positives and negatives, and I think we may, from talking to other town moderators, and I know I was talking to Bobby, the town clerk, and she was saying, talking to other town clerks, most of them say that the people in attendance change, but the numbers don't. So if you go to an evening meeting, you may get more people who couldn't go to a daytime meeting because they work, so they can come to an evening meeting. But you may lose some of the older people who don't want to drive at night. You might get some of the people who work if you have it on a Sunday or a Saturday. But then again, you might not, because they may have little kids and that's their only day to do things with them. So there are trade-offs for every day you pick, or every time you pick. So we'll see.
The goal is most participation possible.
Really, yeah, absolutely.
Are you doing any kind of survey, or?
We've done some, and that was sort of the plan going forward after the last in-person town meeting, and then we had COVID, and that was the end of that.
So you described a little bit the people here, and Marshfield, probably because of Goddard College in large part, but has different factions of people. Has that changed in the time you've lived here?
Not an awful lot.
Or has the tone of the town, I mean, you said people here really participate and work together. Is that all unchanged?
I think that's unchanged. I think there was a period of time there was a period of time where there was a group that kind of stood away from the town, a conservative group that kind of stood away from the town, but I think they're integrating into the town as well. They still maintain their own, there's one group that maintains their own school, and that's certainly their choice, but it would be better for our school if everybody was all together, because our school is so small. The school has lost a lot of lost a lot of students. It's a much smaller school than it used to be, as all of the schools are.
So we have fewer children.
We have fewer, yeah. We have a lot fewer children
and
in the
an
school.
aging population.
Yeah. Well, when my kids went to Twinfield, one of their biggest rivals in basketball and soccer was Cabot, and Cabot doesn't have enough students to field a team now. But we played Cabot for the state championship in soccer. So, that's the tale of the small local schools. We were D4 was a pretty active Division 4.
Yeah.
Twinfield is a D4 school, but Cabot, Rochester, Canaan. There was one just north of St. Johnsbury. Canaan's closed. The one north of St. Johnsbury's closed. Cabot can't field a team, and Rochester's closed.
So we're going to have some issues.
So, yeah. Oh, and they played Chelsea, and Chelsea's closed.
Oh my.
Yeah.
So that's one way we've changed. Then we're becoming an older population.
Yeah, and a lot of the small schools are disappearing. They're going to larger regional schools. Frankly, I think that we may learn something from all of this work from home and Zoom meetings and COVID, and we may be able to use that technology to keep some of our schools and expand the opportunities for students in the schools by using that technology. We've been talking about that for a while, but maybe we've had a drastic demonstration of how it can actually work.
And maybe it's opened up people's thinking about possibility and other creative solutions.
Right, yeah.
Well, how else has Marshfield changed since you've been here, besides that, would you say?
Well, there are a lot more services. I think that the library has become a much bigger entity. They're providing a lot more programming for the population. Mm-hmm. They're doing a lot with kids these days. We've got the History Center, which we always had a historical society, but they never really had a space to do much of a display or presentations.
The Historical Society room we're sitting in, and the library that is behind you.
Yeah. The library in years past is paired with the Council on the Arts, and have had concerts in the gazebo every month, or in the summer months. That was a lot of fun. Came to a bunch of those. The roads were a lot better. When we first moved to Marshfield, mud season was terrible. There were some roads that that were impassable during mud season.
How about yours?
Well, the Naismith Brook Road used to be pretty impassable at times, and Maple Hill was pretty challenging. And there were a number of years we'd get not snow wasn't bad. Snow they can plow, but we'd get like these ice storms. And there were times on Maple Hill that we would have a line of cars just waiting for the sand truck to come, and the only way the sand truck could get up the hill was to back up the hill because they would be sanding in front of their wheels.
Wow.
And George Boardman had a garage in Plainfield, and he had a tow truck. And he would come up, people would, and me included, would start down the hill, and then you'd slide off into the ditch. And he'd call George, and he'd spend the morning towing people out. And he had a deal. He would say, I can tow you out of the ditch and put you on the road, and that'll be $15. Or I can take you to the bottom of the hill, and that'll be $25. So you had to decide, do you think if I get back on the road, am I going to go back in the ditch, or am I going to make it to the bottom? And there was one house Cooksons lived in. And that was right at where the pitch really got bad, and there would be a lot of ice. And so they would always have a coffee pot on, because people would stop and park, or they'd be waiting for George. And they'd let us come over, and we'd hang out in their kitchen and have coffee while we waited to get down the hill.
Oh, for me, that's a nice picture of life here.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And same on our road, there's people at the T on Hollister Hill,
yeah.
And Taylor Farm Road, and they've pulled a lot of people out of the, because you come down our road and you're right at the T and you keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my wife was telling me this week, she said, you got an awful lot of stuff under the back seat of your car. What's all that stuff? We got to clean it out. The kids and grandkids came to visit. We were putting car seats in the back of the truck, and I said, no, I'm going to leave that stuff there. I got my tools, I got my tow strap, I got my jumper cables, just in case. Always carry that stuff along.
Right, yeah, so winters here with roads like that, you have
Yep.
to be prepared.
Oh yeah.
Prepared.
Yeah. Still do. I mean, you never know. Somebody's going to, sometimes it's hard to tell where the road ends and the ditch begins, and if they've been winging back the snow, people go in the ditch, and
yeah.
If you got a tow strap, you can pull them out. So.
Well, when we first moved here, we were so impressed with the road maintenance that we wrote, a thank you letter. And
yeah.
I was wondering if they get a lot of that, because really, it's amazing we have so many dirt roads here.
Yeah. Well, Marshfield, I'm trying to remember the statistic. I think Marshfield has something like 58 miles of roads, and 55 of them are gravel. We've only got about three miles of paved road that's town road. I mean, we've got Route 2 that goes through the middle of it, but town road is almost all gravel.
Wow.
So.
That's an interesting fact. Okay, so talk about you come to, you said you were interested in history, but you became a lawyer.
I went to.
How did you choose that?
It seemed like an interesting profession. I didn't have when I went to college, I didn't have a burning desire to become a lawyer, but it seemed to be a good fit, and so I came to Vermont and went to Vermont Law School. And when I got out of law school, I did a general practice. I worked in a firm in Barrie for a year or so, and then I went out on my own. And I ran a real general practice. I did some criminal work, I did some divorce work, I did collections, I did landlord-tenant, I did bankruptcy, did everything. But over the years, I started narrowing things down. I had a concentration actually in collection work for a while. Wasn't real fond of that. It was interesting though, because I was doing collections for creditors, and I ended up picking up a lot of clients from the people that I was trying to collect from because I treated them like a human. They were getting before dealing with me, they were getting calls from collection agencies who were awful. And actually, that's why it wasn't the greatest work, and I hated dealing with the collection agencies because they treated me, they often treated me like they were treating the debtors, and I said, no. Life's too short to deal with these people. So I got out of that, and I was looking around, and at the time my mother was taking care of my grandfather, and so we were doing some planning for him, and so I started learning a little bit more about elder law, and I said, well, estate planning sounds like an interesting. I'd always done real estate, and I'd done a little bit of sort of basic estate planning, wills and that kind of stuff, but it was getting more complicated. I was finding that all of the various fields of law were becoming more specialized. So like I did criminal for a while, and every now and then I'd get appointed as an attorney, so I'd get paid by the state. But I wasn't doing a lot of criminal work, and then criminal became more specialized. They were doing more with probation and parole, and the rules changed, so there was criminal rules and civil rules, and I just wasn't up on it, so I said I better not do that. I didn't really like doing divorce work. I discovered that and the kids were getting older too, so I was wanting to be more flexible with my schedule to be able to go to their events and stuff. And trial work doesn't lend itself to that, because if you're doing anything in the court system, you're run by the court. They set the schedule and you've got to be there. Estate planning offered an opportunity. It's more, I schedule my appointments when I want to have appointments, and I can schedule time off, and generally I can deal with it. It stays that way. I don't have a court saying, sorry, you've got a hearing today. So I sort of gravitated to more real estate and estate planning, some probate work thrown in. And when I first started, I said, well, estate planning, I'm going to go into it more, so I'm going to do more with trusts and learn about estate tax and do estate tax planning. And when I first started, the estate tax exemption was fairly low, so there were some people. I didn't have an awful lot of clients who had to worry about the estate tax, but I had some. But soon after that, the estate tax exemption started going up and up, so it got up to $1 million, and so a couple could effectively exempt $2 million, and then it started going up from there, and I wasn't doing an awful lot of big estate tax planning anymore. I joined an organization, and they had some marketers who would talk to us, and they said, you've got to look at your clientele, but really you want to focus on your mid-tier client. So usually the mid-tier client is the client who has anywhere from $3.5 to $5 million estate, because they're just at the beginning of needing estate tax planning. And this was on a listserv, so I would always respond that my mid-tier client is a person whose house didn't come on wheels. I never had $3 to $5 million estate clients back. This was back in the 90s and the early 2000s. So that wasn't my area, but I was learning a lot from what my mother was going through with my grandfather, and so I was picking up a lot of what's now called elder law, basically Medicaid planning. What documents do you need in place? What are the Medicaid rules? So if somebody's in a nursing home, they can qualify for Medicaid. What are they going to have to pay? How can you preserve assets? That kind of stuff. So that's what I've really gotten into, and I do a lot of that.
Well, it sounds like it's a different clientele, not a disgruntled one now.
Oh, well, that's
right?
it, yeah. When we started making the shift, I used to see clients in the office, and I would sit behind the desk and they would sit over here. And then as I started making that shift, oftentimes there'd be more family members involved, so I moved, so all my client conferences are around a conference table in a conference room now, instead of, back and forth across a desk.
Yeah, less adversarial.
Yeah, it's much more congenial, much less adversarial. And when we started making the shift, I told my secretary, we're not going to do criminal and we're not going to do divorce. So if anybody calls and that's what they want, she said, boy, do I enjoy saying that. She said, I really like being able to say, sorry, we don't do criminal. You can call this attorney or that attorney. Or we don't do divorces. And then she commented that the dynamic changed with the clients. She said, it used to be people would walk out and they'd be tense and they'd be frowning. And she said, now you have these conferences and I can hear you in there, and people are happy, people are laughing, everybody's pleased when they leave.
And you feel so comforted to have a plan.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's like, well, there's something you can check off the list. And a lot of people, I don't see it as much anymore, but we used to see a lot of people who had they were really apprehensive about coming and talking about estate planning. It's like, oh, I'm going to make my will and then I'm going to die. And it's like, no, you're not. Just come and we're going to talk, and it doesn't have to be a heavy discussion, because I like to, get people in. We talk about, what did you do? Are you retired, or what do you do in your retirement? What did you do for work? Tell me about your kids. What are your kids doing? Do you have grandchildren? Where are they? What are they doing? So we have these wide-ranging discussions, which I find fascinating. I love to talk to the clients and get their story.
So different than a highly technical
right,
conversation.
right, and it's it's a way to find out in a simple way if they have some special planning needs. So if I'm talking about their grandchildren, they're more likely to say, oh yeah, well, I've got a child who's a grandchild who's autistic, or and I don't have to bring that question to them. They volunteer it if we're talking about things, or
right.
Oh, my son's got some issues or something, and so maybe we should explore that a little more. For maybe you don't want to, if he's been through bankruptcy twice, you don't want to leave him a big inheritance outright. We can plan around that, those kinds of things. So.
Well, it's funny because I'm having images of, we used to have the doctor who made house visits, so your friendly
right.
local doctor, and you feel like our friendly local lawyer.
Right. Well, I do make house calls too.
You do?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Well, my office is not handicap accessible. Bad thing for elder law attorney to have a non-handicap accessible office, but the building I'm in, my father and another dentist built in Barrie back in '68, and he was still practicing in the building when I moved into the basement office to open my law office. So, and I'm still there. So
in the basement office. In
the basement office, and I've looked a number of times, and we can't make it handicap accessible. So, I just tell clients, if you've got a problem and you can't come to me, I can come to you.
Awesome.
So, we don't do it very often, and
Mm-hmm. So we're a litigious society. Is Vermont different? Is practicing law here different? Do you think? Or
I think,
being a rural lawyer, is it different than Burlington?
Well, I think being a rural lawyer is different from being a lawyer in a larger firm in Burlington, and of course, a large firm in Vermont is a small firm anywhere else. It really is. And I think the nice thing about Vermont is still the practice of law is still pretty collegial. Because there aren't that many lawyers, so the likelihood that you're going to run into the same guy on another case is pretty high. And you're going to run into him at the Bar Association meetings, and you're going to you might run into him at the local restaurant, So I think, you know, in Los Angeles or, you know, or Chicago, you can take a hard line with somebody because you may never come up against them again.
Mm-hmm.
But in Vermont, you know, you've got to think about, why am I doing this, you know? Is there, if there's a real advantage to the client to, for example, if another attorney calls up and says, oh, I need an extension to answer your interrogatories, you could say, no, I'm not going to give you an extension, and then you know that the guy's just going to file a motion for an extension. You're going to have a hearing, and it's going to be more attorney's fees. In some places, they'll do that. In Vermont,
You mean to jack up their fees?
to jack up their fees, or just to put the other side to more expense. I mean, I don't understand it
Less
myself,
friendly.
but it's a lot less friendly. They're just every opportunity to battle, they battle, and in Vermont, they're not like that.
That's an interesting thing, I mean, because this sounds like the select board, you know, doings where, because they know they're gonna have people question them.
Right.
And they're gonna see these people, it
Yeah.
kind of is a framework to help us stay a little more.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's very true.
Cooperative.
Yeah, I think, well, it's, you know, Vermont's a small place, and you never know where you're gonna run into somebody, you know? So,
That's a pretty big upside.
yeah, I think it is. It really is, yeah, yeah.
So did COVID affect your practice?
I never closed, I always went to the office. And my secretary always came to the office. But we basically locked the door. We used to have walk-ins. We don't have walk-ins anymore. We didn't have anybody in the office for about 2.5 months. We did get some work done, and we were able to do signings in the parking lot. But you could sign a deed in the parking lot because it only takes 5 minutes, or you could sign a power of attorney in the parking lot because it only takes a few minutes. You couldn't really sign a whole estate plan in the parking lot because I really go through everything with the client beforehand, and that just didn't work. It also seemed every time we had a parking lot signing, it snowed.
So what do you do with the longer ones?
So we just put off the longer ones, and then we opened the office back up in probably late June of 2020. And what we were doing is I got a big sneeze guard that runs the center of the conference table. We asked clients who were coming in, they would wear a mask, we would wear masks. We asked them not to bring their kids, so, you know, just the client, the individual client, or, you know, 2 clients, whatever, but not the whole family. Sometimes we'd have the whole family there, and we didn't want that anymore. And we started doing like just 1 appointment in the morning and 1 appointment in the afternoon, and limited them coming in. I blocked off the waiting room. So we've got a front door and then a waiting room over on the side, and then the conference room is a straight shot from the front door. So I just put a barrier, so we'd open the door to the conference room and have them come right into the conference room so they didn't come into the rest of the office. It worked.
And you chose not to do by mail, like sending documents by mail?
Well, the problem with most of state planning documents is either there are very technical requirements for signing. If you
Witness.
you usually in a will you need 2 witnesses, and there are some pretty technical requirements about how that's done. I mean, there's certain magic words that have to be said, and you know, everybody's got to be together, and so I don't like sending those out and thinking that they're actually going to get done properly. And the other problem was that most of the other documents require a couple of witnesses and a notary. And the legislature did pass a statute that allowed remote notarization, but it was really cumbersome. So we could do it by video, but you had to be able to identify the document that they were signing. There had to be interaction. I had to save a copy of the video for 7 years. They had to send the document back to me the same day. It was just,
Wow.
it was. I didn't like it at all.
So now you and
We
your
did
secretary are the notary and the witnesses?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, and that's what we do at the office. And I did a couple of remote notarizations, and I was surprised at how much cooperation I got from both of them were nursing home signings, so I was surprised at how much cooperation we got from the staff at the nursing home to actually walk around with an iPad and that kind of thing. And it worked. I mean, it got the document signed, and it was a good thing, but I wouldn't want to make it a regular practice.
Right.
Yeah. And I just and I did a bunch of, I was doing a lot more Zoom conferences, and I may continue with that because I get clients from all over, and it's a lot easier for a client from Newport to do a Zoom conference than to drive all the way down to my office, although I prefer the in-person stuff. It's nice to see people across the table and, really, and I don't find that I interact as well on Zoom. It's not as easy to just engage in a conversation, and I think most people are the same way. It's more, let's get to business and get done with this thing.
Yeah, like more formal.
Yeah. So I still prefer the in-person, but we're doing some Zoom, and I'm sure that'll continue.
So are you pretty much back to
Yeah, we're pretty
normal?
much back to normal now. Actually, I think last week was the first week we had people in unmasked, and they would come, and I was greeting them with a mask on, and they would come in and they would say, "We're fully vaccinated." I say, "Okay, if you want to take your mask off, that's fine. We're fully vaccinated here in the office too, so if you want to take your masks off, that's fine by me, and I'll take mine off if it's okay with you." And,
Good.
yeah, but we still have the sneeze guard up,
Uh-huh.
and I think I'll probably keep that up for a while. I don't know. It's a minimal intrusion.
Right. May save you from getting the flu.
Well, yeah, that's one thing that we've all noticed is a lot less colds and flu last year.
Yeah, right. So do you have plans to retire, and will you retire here?
I'm starting to think about retiring a little bit, more so because my wife is already retired and she keeps saying I should. My son is studying law right now, and he's kind of interested in the kind of practice I do, so he may be my retirement plan. That's what I'm kind of looking forward to, but I don't have any immediate plans to retire. Pardon? Tony, yeah. Yeah. It's been interesting. Tony was very involved at Twinfield, and then he was a teacher at Twinfield. And so when I started practice, my father had been a dentist in Barrie for years. And I still get people who come in and say, "Oh, your dad was my dentist," But people would always come in and say, "Oh, your dad's my dentist. I've known your father for years and years." And then we went through this period of time where people were coming in and saying, "Is Tony your son?" Oh, we all know Tony because he was teaching and he was coaching girls soccer and doing the men's soccer program. So he was out in the community a lot. And so yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting.
That is funny. Because of my dad and my son, I'm known.
Right? Yeah.
So
There were a few people who knew me as well, but
well, especially now.
Yeah.
I mean, you obviously are a very involved resident. So we're going to be wrapping it up a little bit now. I didn't ask you about any projects or interests you have after the kids were raised and you had your profession. Are there any projects or interests that you
well, one of the things we did
about?
one of the things we did when the kids were young is we early on we bought a trailerable sailboat, 22 foot, and so we would take maybe a long weekend or two and a week or 10 days of summer vacation. We would sail on Lake Champlain, just the four of us. No electronics. And
And the boys were okay with
and
that?
the boys loved it, and they'd like to do it with their kids. We sailed on Champlain, and we'd launch in one area and we'd sail, but we'd stay in marinas some of the time. We'd anchor out some of the time. We'd swim off the sailboat. We did a lot of reading, talking, cooking on the boat. It was great. Now my folks have always had a camp on Harvey's Lake over in West Barnet, which we now own. And when the boys the boat was getting a little crowded, and because it didn't grow with them, so we haven't been using that sailboat much for a number of years, but we've been focused more at the lake, and so we're doing a lot at the lake, and water ski, kayak, canoe, sail, all that kind of stuff.
Still, like you do that?
Oh, yeah.
You water skiing and everything?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Sailing, kayaking, whatever. Yeah.
And history, how do you satisfy your history interest?
Read.
You still reading a lot?
Still read a lot, yeah.
You have any special areas of interest?
Oh, I've got a kind of a wide range of things that I read. I'll read history, biography, historical fiction, murder mysteries, lawyer mysteries, you name it. That's one of the big conversations when everybody gets together is, what are you reading and what do you recommend, So, yeah, it's good.
So is there anything you're most proud of in your life, or one thing you want to mention that stands out for you so far?
Oh gee, I don't know. It's I don't know. It's fun just being able to look back and say, these are the people I helped, and we had good outcome where we had good outcomes, and look at my kids and say, look at what a great job they're doing now. Very proud of them and the grandkids. So.
You must have a large social network. I mean, you've been here for your whole life. You've practiced here.
Yeah, well, we know a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to have a large.
Yeah.
Good friend network. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got a group of close friends, and then we've got a large group of friends, I would say. Good.
Okay. So
Yeah.
is there anything I should ask you about that I wouldn't know to ask? Or anything you want to...
Gee, I don't know. I can't think of anything. Not offhand, anyway.
How was your wife living with 3 boys? 3 guys? 3 men?
Well, she's glad we've got granddaughters. I think she had a great time, and she's always said, I think boys were a lot easier than girls. Although she always wanted a girl, but now we've got 2 granddaughters, so she's enjoying that.
And she's enjoying retirement.
She's really enjoying retirement. She felt she really retired at the right time. Big changes at the hospital. They were going to new computer system. She'd been working on oncology. There were a lot of changes going on and she felt it was a good time to leave. And then COVID hit, which made it perfect. So she didn't have to deal with that. And, yeah, so she's gotten into a lot more gardening and trying out different activities and stuff. And, had more time to spend with the grandkids. She's been able to go out. Nick lives in Hood River, Oregon, and that's where the girls are. So she's gone out a couple of times to stay with them. And we were lucky enough to have them come last summer for 2.5 months and stay with us. And they came Saturday, and they're going to be here for 6 weeks. So.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow, a nice
So,
long visit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
On the lake?
Yeah, and we're basing on the lake. So we had a great Father's Day with both of the boys and grandkids.
Wow, life is good.
That was great. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Awesome.
And so she's getting to take care of the girls because Nick and his wife Sonia are having to work remotely. So they're working at our house. I'm going to my office, and Diane is at camp with the girls.
That sounds pretty ideal for
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
With
it's pretty cool.
Something similar with us last year too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you know, you talk about small town. Nick and his wife Sonia started dating in 8th grade. They both went to Twinfield, and her father was a teacher at Twinfield, and her sister was in Tony's class in high school. Tony's class all the way through. I mean, they were all at the same. So Sonia was a year below Nick, and then Tony and Sonia's sister were the year below that. So it's.
And did Tony marry a Marshfield woman?
No, he married, or is going to marry. He's going to get married January 1st of 2022 in Northern Ireland. But she has dual citizenship, and she actually went to Twinfield. He met her at Twinfield. She only went to Twinfield, I think it was 5th or 6th grade, for a period of time. But then she moved to Barrie, and she was living in Barrie. I think she was at that point, I think she was maybe going, she moved to Ireland to live with her grandmother to go to high school, but she came back in the summers to live with her mother. And Tony was working at Bob's Camera, and when she came in to have pictures developed, and he recognized her, and they started going out.
Wow, what a story!
Yeah, and so they had an on and off long distance relationship for years, and
From Ireland.
Well,
Or
she was
still?
She was in Ireland, and then she moved to Scotland. She went to college in Scotland, and then she worked in both England and Scotland for a while. So she'd come back summer times a lot, and so yeah, they're making it work. And then she came back, and she's been here for 2 or 3 years. He bought a house in Burlington.
Oh, but he's in Ireland now?
No, he's going to Ireland in August.
Okay.
But he's got a renter for the house.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, you won't pick up roots here.
Well, yeah, they're going to come back. They'll be back.
So they're just going to live overseas for a little bit?
Yeah, they're taking care of her grandmother.
I see. Family.
Yeah.
Okay, and he'll get to be a tour guide again.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So.
Wow. Well, I think it's a wrap.
Okay, great.
And
This has been fun.
so nice to get to know you.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So you guys live up on
Hollister Hill.
Hollister Hill? Okay.
Yeah, kind of a mile up from the farm.
Okay.
Did you know Helen Schneer?
I remember the name. I
It
remember the name.
used to be
Yeah.
her house.
Okay.
And right up from Bruce McDonald.
Okay.
I don't know who you might know up there, but
We almost changed that road name, you know.
really?
Yeah.
You Taylor Farm changed, right? Didn't that used to be East Hill or something? Or was
Could
that
be.
always Taylor Farm?
I don't recall that
Oh.
one, but I remember we got into big trouble trying to change Hollister Hill Road.
And why did you want to change it?
Well, it was when we had to go to the 911
Oh, yeah.
addresses.
Yeah.
And, we figured Hollister Hill is Hollister Hill from 2 up to the top of the hill.
Right.
But, now you go up and you make a jog and you go down past the cemetery and then you have to make another right, and that's really another road. So that was going to be,
So you were
That
going
was
to
gonna-
change it from the farm
yeah, we're going to change it from
or from Eaton Cemetery?
the little white house with the pond right there at where you make the
Tibbetts place.
Tibbetts.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and he was madder than a wet hen when he heard that was going to become West Hill Road.
Oh.
And he said, I lived on Hollister Hill all my life, and I'm not moving to West Hill.
So was it citizens getting upset that
Yeah.
made the change?
Yeah, we just, they just came out with a map of, this is what we were thinking of for roads, and oh man, that was the one that really got people going.
Tibbetts?
Well, no,
that-
changing Hollister Hill Road, and it was just that section, because it's always been Hollister. I said, okay, fine.
And it's kind of like a good address. You
Yeah.
know, it's,
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a desired neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a really nice place to live. And
Oh, it is,
Just
yeah.
a wonderful group of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, since COVID has lifted,
Yeah.
we've had 3 or 4 gatherings.
Oh,
you
really?
know,
That's
in-
nice.
In the works,
Yeah.
yeah. So, people just wanna get together again.
Yeah, yeah, for
Like you
sure.
say, it's, I feel like I'm surrounded by any help I need if I ever need it, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we feel that way up on Maple Hill too. It's like,
Yeah.
you know, we don't, we've talked about having some get-togethers. We haven't had too many, but, you know, we know if we needed something, there are people we could reach out to and there'd be no problem.
Yeah. And it's
We were,
so different.
Tony was up at my house this spring. We had some big branches and tops of trees that came down with those windstorms.
Oh, yeah.
So we were chainsawing those up, and we were looking, there's a little cemetery just across from our property, and a couple of trees came down there. And we were talking to a neighbor who was walking his dog by the house, and he said, well, you know, if you want to, Tony said, well, maybe we should go over and cut that up. And he said, well, I got a chainsaw. I said, if you want to organize a time, you know, we can all get together and do it, we can do that. And I said, sure, that'd be great. And by the time we got done cutting up our stuff, Tony said, do you want to organize that with him? And I said, oh, I don't know when I'd organize it with him. My weekends are, you know, I got a lot of stuff going on. He said, well, I think I'm going to go over and just cut it up then. And so he did, and I went over and stacked it off to the side. But, you know.
Oh. Yeah, well, on our road too, we've had a number of times where we would have been blocked in
Yeah.
on both sides. And Bruce McDonald was always out there with his chainsaw.
Yeah, well, we've got the guy. There's a family, the Bailey family. I don't know if you know the Baileys.
Yeah.
They had Bailey Brothers Auto Parts,
Oh, yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
and then now they own McLeod Spring and Glass, which is really Bailey's Spring and Glass and
Huh.
Berry. They work on trucks and heavy equipment stuff.
Yeah.
But it's a big family. I went to school with one of the boys, and they're from Barry, but they actually own all of the land around Pigeon Pond, and they own all the way, which is what, 1.5 miles from our house, and they own all the way down to our property.
Wow.
So they have this huge tract of land that they log, and that's about it. But he periodically will stay at the pond, even through the winter.
Wow.
And it was really fortunate that when he was staying there, he would come down and was on a work schedule about the same as my wife, because she had to be out, she had to be at work by 6:30 in the morning.
Wow.
So she'd leave at 6. And Brian had come down, and if there were trees down, Brian had his chainsaw in his truck, so he would go down in front of her and he would clear the trees.
Well, plus you had to have a plow guy who was willing to come early, right?
Yeah, well, we always had at least a 4-wheel drive, so we we just park right off the road, so you could
Okay.
usually get through. But
Uh-huh.
the plows were good about coming early. But Brian would clear the road with the trees. That was always a good thing.
That's great.
Yeah.
so I have a personal question from
Sure.
my point of view. Do you know Kathy Melconian by
Yeah.
any chance, or any of that? Did we talk about that?
Kathy Melconi was in my high school class,
Yeah.
Aha.
and her doctor had an office below my father for a period of time.
Her dad?
Her dad.
Yeah.
Was we actually had a bad accident at the bottom of Maple Hill, and
You
Dr.
yourself were in it?
yeah, my wife and I,
Okay.
and Dr. Melconian stitched up my wife's head.
Wow.
She hit the windshield and
Mm.
really tore up her forehead, and he did all of it. He actually, Dr. Melconian had been at the hospital and was on his way home when the ambulance was taking her to the hospital, and they called him back because he wasn't a plastic surgeon, but he had an interest in plastic surgery, and the people in the emergency room knew that, and they said, get him back.
So did he do a good job?
He did a great job.
That's great.
Great job.
Wow. Well, that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I know we knew the Melconian family pretty well, yeah.
And does
So-
that mean Doug Grout and that side of the family too? Joanne Grout and,
I know the Grout name,
Yeah,
yeah, those
'cause-
names are
They're the
familiar.
Brown side.
oh, that's
yeah.
Kathy's mother's
Yeah.
side, okay, yeah. Because her mother, well, so the Melconians, Dr.
Kathy's.
Melconian had the farm in Montpelier.
In East Montpelier, yeah, and
And
actually
right-
he was in Montpelier,
In
that's right,
Montpelier,
yeah,
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 yeah, they
Yeah.
still, still in family hands.
yeah, the son bought it,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then, yep, yep.
Yep.
Yep, well, yeah,
Yeah, Kathy was, she wasn't in my graded school. I think she was at Spalding graded with me, but not elementary school.
oh,
Because
interesting.
they didn't live, Barry had 5 or 6 elementary schools.
Okay,
So like, but then when they first developed the graded school, which was grades 6, 7, and 8, they built a new high school. The Spalding High School is the new school, the new high school.
uh-huh,
What used to be what is the History Center now, was Spalding Graded School, and it was the original high school.
oh.
So I went to, the History Center was where I went to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I went to Lincoln School for elementary school, and it's now an old folks' home.
I wondered
The
what
Lincoln
that
House,
was.
yeah, Lincoln
Lincoln
House.
House, yeah, yeah.
So if I go to visit a client there, I'm looking around and saying, oh, I went to 1st grade in this room, and I went to 2nd grade in this room.
Funny.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she
We
had
were-
said to say hi, so I kind of mentioned
Oh, I
Kathy
see.
earlier. I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
if you knew who I meant.
Oh, yeah, I did, yeah.
Yeah.
When you said Kathy Brown, it took me a moment to
Yeah.
make the switch to Melconian, but yeah, yeah.
So we did Jenny Warshaw and her mother.
Yeah.
Last, and it was Jenny, right, that went to school in this room, I think.
In this room,
Yeah.
yep.
Really?
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Cool.
yeah, and some others too.
Yeah, well, so she does the same thing. Oh, I went to school.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, now you're not part of the Marshfield Historical Society, are you?
Nope,
No.
I haven't joined the historical societies.
Mm.
But, our house is very historic, though.
Is it?
Yeah.
When was it built?
1857,
Wow.
by a guy named Knowles.
No.
Bowles.
Bowles.
Yeah, it was the Bowles farm.
Mhm.
And then it was purchased by Bill Henry and Nellie Gill Henry.
Hmm.
And Nellie Gill was an actress.
Huh.
She was an actress in New York.
Huh.
And she would come up here
Still
in the,
running? Good.
she would come up here in the summers. And she had a summer theater group. And they would travel around and put on plays. And they used to practice in our barn.
And where would they put on plays?
Oh, they'd put on,
In
there,
public
if you,
buildings?
all over.
Oh.
If you go down to the old town hall in Plainfield, they've got a picture of a poster of the Nellie Gill Players. And
Wow.
it was our house.
And did you get to watch them rehearse?
No, that was,
Oh.
no, that was in the 20s and 30s, yeah.
Oh, I see, I
Yeah.
see, okay.
But
So it has history.
it has history, yeah. Yeah.
I always wished, that people, our house was built in 1975, so it's not old, but I always wish that people would put notes and photographs, like in the wall or somewhere
Yeah.
for the next owner.
Yeah,
Because even when you try to piece together the history of
Yeah.
your house, it's hard to do.
yeah.
Yeah.
I found a note years ago in one of the Beers Atlases or something. There was something that had notable people of the various towns, and they actually talked about John Bowles. He set some sort of, I don't know if it was a record or he was just notable for his ability to cut and split wood or something, and how many cords that he could do in a day or something. Thought it was an unusual little note to
Yeah.
find. And then we did find some pictures and stuff of Nellie Gill that we tried to keep at the house.
Very nice.
yeah. And she had a following, because we've been contacted by some people who remember the Nellie Gill Players or were in the Nellie Gill Players or something. We were early on. We were reading. The Times Argus used to have a magazine called the Country Courier.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they had a little history section, and somebody had written this thing about Nellie Gill and the Nellie Gill Players, and how they were the people were really connected to Nellie Gill and the farm, and how somebody had recently died, and their wish was to have their ashes spread at the Nellie Gill house. And we said, wait a minute, that's our house. Nobody told us they were spreading ashes in our house. But apparently they did.
Apparently they did.